Howdy Bubs and welcome back. Today we're going to be covering our next topic in our making of our platformer. We're going to talk about building a game object for just room restarts, as well as setting up a parallax effect and working with our backgrounds. So let's go ahead and dive into this. Where we last left off, we simply had added in our weapon, our projectile, shake effects, we have walls with collisions, and we can run around the world fairly simply. Nothing too crazy. But we want to add a little bit more to this world. But also what happens if, for instance, I get stuck in here. I can't get out. My only recourse of action is to hit close it out and press play again. To save everybody time whenever you're testing your game out, we're going to quickly create a small object. This object is going to be OGame. It'll handle a lot of other things later on, but let's go ahead and create this here now. It's not going to have any sprite, and it's simply going to have a step event that will allow us for this moment game restart. Let me increase the size of this for y'all. And so, actually I don't need to even put this in a step event. Let me change the event to be key press event for R. There. Much simpler. Game restart. Room restart will be better for now. Maybe we'll add in game restart as a separate thing up until we get actual functionality for our game and a options menu. But until then, this will suffice. Now I can go into my room, place my game object here. I need to make sure I'm in the correct layer. While we're at that, we might as well create an appropriate layer to hold many of these items. I'm going to create a new asset layer, and I'm going to rename this to game control. Actually, yeah, you can't have spaces in there, my bad. Game control. And so we'll have the game object, and I'm actually going to pull the camera out of here and place it inside of game control. So that way I can see the players there, my game control is there, and it's better organized. Now, whenever I hit run, I launch into my room. I can jump over into this space. I get stuck. Oh no. I don't want to have to close this out and run it again, because on y'all's computers it takes quite a while to build back up again. I can simply press R. It restarts the room. Now if you left it for the game, it'll get the same effect as well, for the moment. Once you have more rooms, then that gets a little bit more complicated. You might want to have two controls, one for the game, one for the room. The next part is working with our background. I have painstakingly created a couple of sprites, a nice little balloon stand, a sun, and some ground. We're going to put all of that together to make a nice background effect. Now, starting off, let's go ahead and set the background. I want to create a kind of like sky blue. This kind of looks like the sky. It's close enough. Add another background layer. Now, this background layer, rather than us just setting a color for the entire background like we do with our normal background, I'm actually going to rename this to sky. This background layer is going to have a sprite. I'm going to select my sun sprite. And there we go. We have a nice little sun in the background right there. And let me go ahead and rename this to sun. I'm going to offset this a little. I want my sun closer to the middle of the screen. And so 1024 ought to be the middle of my room. I think so. Actually, it's a little off because I use the top left corner rather than the center. You should make sure you know how your sprites are set up. I'm going to do this middle center so that way I can go back to my room, and this is properly centered now in my room. We have the sun there. I also want to set the ground down below. I'm going to make another background layer. Move this, needs to be above the sky, and this will be ground, and I'm going to go ahead and select my sprite S ground. But it's only got this little block. That's not ideally perfect for what I want to have set up. I also want this down here. So I need to lower it in the Y direction by a bit. My world is 1024. The block is 64 by 64, so I just need to subtract from that. So that should be 960 to move this down, and there we go. Perfectly set up. And I want to horizontal tile this across the bottom. Let me get rid of the grid. So we've got a background. It looks nice enough. But I want to also add into this world my balloon stand. Let's add yet another background layer. And I want this to be right here in between these. This will be balloon stand. This balloon stand is going to have this sprite, and it's not going to be over there. I'm going to modify it, move it down a bit. 1024, have that kind of center. Move this down, let's see, 960. Another 64 should have it at 896. Sets it up right there. There we go. I've got this little balloon stand. I've got the sun. They work. We now have elements to our background. But why did I set these things up onto separate layers? Why do they all have their own background layer? And what is parallax? Well, if we run this right now, as I move to the right, we see the sun stays there and the balloon stand stays there. There's no difference in how I view either of them. Actually, I'm going to lower the sun just a bit to make this easier to see. What I want to demonstrate is an effect known as parallax, which is as you move, different components move at different rates to give a sense of depth. So if I were to add in some mountains right here, I add another background layer, and this will be in the furthest back. No, I want it above the ground. Rename this to mountains. Now mind you, again, I'm not an artist. This will look bad. Let me go ahead and set my mountains. We see it only fills up this first portion. I want to make sure this gets horizontally layered across. Not quite perfect, close enough. The sun's probably not supposed to be in front of the mountains, so I might want to move this around. But the sun is behind the mountains, as it would scientifically make sense. There we go. Okay. So now I have my mountains. Again, it's not perfectly tiled. I'm not a great artist. It'll do. Now that I have multiple layers going on, my nice little balloon stand down at the bottom of the mountain, I have my ground, I have my massive mountains, I have my sun and my sky, which is our original background layer I've just set to be blue. We're now good to go to add some element of parallax by modifying our camera. If we go down to the bottom of the camera object, past our setting the point, we want to also include a little section for parallax. Let's go ahead and modify the layer X of a specific layer. As I walk, I want my sun layer, you can make sure it matches whatever layer you're talking about. So as I walk, every 1.5 steps, the sun will move 1. And we can't actually see the sun because it is so high. There we go, that's good enough. So we can at least visualize the sun. So as I move, you see the sun is moving along with it. It's not staying static. It is coming along. For every 1.5 steps I make, it moves 1 step. Now, if you want to reduce that, you, of course, raise this rate. And so let's show the effect of the mountain. mountains if it were simply X. It keeps up with us as we move. So as I walk along the camera, the mountains are moving along with us. The sun goes at a slightly different rate. Depending on how you're doing your game, this could look weird, but every step of X that the camera moves, the mountains will move with us. So once we get to this edge where the camera is no longer moving, the mountains are not moving and neither is the sun. But once we get past this point, we see the sun starts coming out of the side as we move along. But this is our simple introduction to Parallax and our game object. If you have any questions or need any assistance in class, just let me know. Everyone have a good one, and I'll see y'all next time. I just wanted to say thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. Shout out to my bad bubs, my top 5, my day ones. Y'all have always been there for me. Next up, my baby bubs, the next 5. I always love y'all's support. And finally, for everyone else, any little bit helps. Thank you to all my basic bubs for supporting me along my journey.